When is Alibaba going to the moon?
That's a great question, Daren. For any of you that have the answer to that question, please feel free to email me as well. I'll be keen to know. Truth be told, I don't know, but I think we are kind of forming a bottom for now.
Famous last words. The future seems so uncertain. I bring Keng back here in the channel. He is Singapore's #1 Alibaba bull.
I don't dare claim that title, but yeah, I'm pretty passionate about the stock itself.
So today we're going to talk about what lies ahead for Alibaba. Will Alibaba find a cave with all the treasure and steal the wealth from the 40 thieves? Click subscribe to stay updated to more videos on investing. Has Alibaba become a more attractive investment this year in 2022?
Right, I think attractiveness is pretty relative. To me, I think it has become a lot more attractive because the valuations of Alibaba has come down significantly. But that said, I think for many people that take the opposing side of the view, the risk is kind of emphasized and amplified by multiple folds because we have talks about a geopolitical tension, about how it's going to be nationalized, etc., etc. But personally, I think based on how it has been growing thus far, it's still growing by the way, but many other Chinese big tech has been seeing some slowdown even to a negative year-on-year growth. So to me, I think it's performing thus far, but I think it's still a KIV, a keep in view, where we need to really monitor how the business has grew or evolved over the years.
On that topic, yesterday, Alibaba released their Q3 earnings.
Right.
What's your take?
I think in yesterday's report, before we even talk about any numbers, and I wouldn't be sharing too much numbers here because it will be slightly complicated. I want to plug my own channel if you guys are interested. I'll be dropping Alibaba breakdown video soon, so do check it out there. But I think specifically there were two main mentions that investors were probably more excited about. I think firstly it's about the share buyback program. So I think Alibaba has introduced an additional $15 billion on top of the initial $25 billion. So out of the 25 billion, they have already expensed off 18 billion. So they left 7B from the first issuance and now additional 15B. So that's 22 billion in total. So if you were to look at Alibaba's market cap, based on yesterday's close, it's around 200 to 220 billion. So the additional 22B is around 10% of the current market cap. So assuming that nothing changes, the valuation of Alibaba stays constant, within the next 10 quarters, they're going to buy back this 22 billion. So that's a 10% yield for free. It just drops down from sky. And that's basically a blessing from God. So that was probably why the share price reacted quite positively. And there were a lot of investors that were stoked with this buyback. So that's the first point. I think on the second point, which is a more negative light, when we look at a lot of the developments thus far, on a positive tone, there was a lot of optimizing in terms of cost structure. So some of their business units has turned profitable, EBITDA profitable at least, which is their Cainiao, which is their logistics business. And there were a lot of cost cutting. Even though sales and marketing has gone down significantly, I think R&D, they kind of pace normally. But the bad part about this is you can see that there's quite significant slowdowns in some of the very core problems. So for example, like the China commerce business, their CMR revenue was down 7% year on year, and that's a call for concern because it's a main bulk of their business. And secondly, it's the cloud. So cloud only grew, I think, 4% year on year. And for many Alibaba bulls, they're saying that this is the next growth engine. But you can't be a growth engine if it's only growing 4% year on year, right? So I think, but the caveat here is because the whole economy is slowing down, and they've been blaming a lot of this sort of performance to the macro environment. There is a limit where investors are saying enough is enough. You can't keep blaming the macro environment, but also we have to take into account the considerations of the competitors as well. But I think for now, I think it's still in a relatively safe space, but I wouldn't say that it's over. So I also wouldn't call that this is definitely the bottom, but I do see signs of bottoming for now.
I want to build on 2 points. First would be buybacks. With Alibaba increasing buybacks, that's generally well received by investors. And Apple's had good success with the stock with this buyback program over the years. However, buybacks are no guarantee that the stock price will go up.
Yes.
Some companies actually accelerated buybacks, but the stock price still went down in recent years. There are a range of factors behind this. The buybacks aren't the only solution. I say that because in today's context, there are quite a number of Tesla investors who are asking Tesla to do a buyback. But even then, there's no guarantee that it's going to impact the stock price in the short term.
Right.
It may take some time for it to materialize.
Yes.
Second thing on commerce, Alibaba's business is predominantly commerce still, right? More than 80% commerce. Yeah. And that's been driving the overall growth. It's been growing about 3% in the most recent quarter. Alibaba was the one that popularized Singles Day,
Right.
11/11, the
Right.
pioneer.
Right.
This was the first year that they did not release single day sales results. How should we read that?
I think it's a very complicated topic. I think for some context as well, JD, which is Alibaba's main competitor, didn't release their Singles Day results as well. So it can be argued both ways. So the bulls will say that, oh, it's not an Alibaba problem. It does seem like it's a China-specific problem where they don't want them to have huge galas to boast to everybody that, hey, the economy is slowing down. I think youth unemployment in China today is one of the highest out of, I think, the last decade or so. I think for the younger age group, I think it's between 15 to 24 or something, the unemployment figures are like 20% now. So it's one of the highest. So then when the economy is slowing down, people are slowly losing their jobs. And then you have this sort of huge galas telling people that, hey, Alibaba is doing fine, JD is doing fine. I think that's slightly insensitive. I think that's one point of view. On the second part, some might say that, hey, maybe the numbers are not good. That's why they're not revealing it. I think the truth is probably somewhere in between. They did give some sort of guidance saying that the 11/11 figures for this year is in line with last year. So in line, I think you can take it three ways. It's either the same, slightly above, or slightly below. But I guess from that perspective, if they're able to hold how they've been performing thus far, at least from a very huge base, I don't see it as a huge problem. At least if we were to try to superimpose the whole context of China and how the companies are performing today.
China plays such a big part in Alibaba's
Right.
business today. And there are plans here that China may want to start reopening the country, the economy by March next year. What impact would this have on Alibaba?
I think this impact will probably come in multiple folds. I think firstly we talk about, maybe you can first discuss how the current lockdowns and the perpetual COVID restrictions have been treating Alibaba as a business. If you were to dive deeper down into the individual business units, I think in just this earnings quarter, you can see two main business units actually benefited. So one is the China Logistics, which is their logistics network, and the second one is their local consumer business. So it's basically like a Grab, which is the Grab of China. They have this platform called Ele.me. So from this perspective, you can see that these two were the main beneficiaries of these lockdowns. While on the other hand, you can see that other companies like people pull back spending. So the cloud adoption has been extremely slow, and even for commerce activities, it hasn't really been moving anywhere. Like it's just staying there for now. So I think it's a give and take. So when China opens up again, these two will probably pull back, and hopefully these two will start picking up. So it's always it's good to have a diversified portfolio in a way, so that when the tide or when the wind comes, you can kind of position the business in a way where you are able to still capture some sort of growth from this perspective. But I also remain hopeful because I believe that when they come out or when they tide through this entire lockdown problem, it's going to be beneficial to the economy as a whole. Businesses are going to start spending again, consumers are going to gain confidence again, and all this in general should be a tipping point towards the better side of things.
A recession's like a wildfire.
Right.
It helps clear a forest and also maintains a long-term health. So right now what's happening is in a tough time, many companies may not succeed, but those with strength and those with critical mass, whether it's Alibaba or Tesla, hopefully they consolidate and become stronger over time.
Right.
What are important milestones for Alibaba next year?
In terms of milestones, I think we can look at it from both sides. So one probably internal and one probably external. So I think the external part, there's been a lot of emotional gyration. People talking about the HEFCA Act, the auditing deal, the primary listing. I think these are the few very main talking points for many of these Chinese tech companies, not only Alibaba specifically. So Alibaba, firstly, they are trying to do a primary listing in Hong Kong, and technically speaking, it's supposed to be done by this year. But I think in the recent earnings call, they say that it's going to be delayed to next year. So that's the first part. The second part is the auditing problem, the HEFCA Act, which is the Holding Foreign Companies Accountable Act. They recently came back from Hong Kong, so we are awaiting their report. So that's on the external front. Then on the internal front, some of the key milestones is probably this idea of cloud adoption. I think many investors are getting frustrated saying that, they're blaming things like the education companies being wiped by the government, so they're pulling back spending. The internet companies, because of the year-long crackdown, they're also pulling back spending. And more importantly, a lot of all this idea behind TikTok, a lot of all these big behemoths moving away because they're basically strong-armed by the foreign government, so namely the US, telling them that, hey, you can't use local solutions. So you can't use Ali Cloud, you can't use Tencent Cloud, you can only use AWS, Google Cloud, or Microsoft Azure, for example. So these are a few considerations thus far. So we do hope that there is a recent take-up in terms of understanding how they are able to grow into that addressable market of the cloud segment, and more importantly for commerce to continue picking up, because competition has been quite fierce in China today. I think for TikTok, for TikTok parents companies ByteDance, Kuaishou, many of all these live streaming platforms are slowly growing into a behemoths of their own right. So in that aspect, you also have to be, even though it's true that Alibaba still has a very strong network effect, there's still a crazy amount of people using. I don't know where they find these users, but you have to closely monitor in terms of how the fundamentals are building up thus far. So yeah, these are the two key aspects that I think commerce and cloud, because they still hold a good chunk. I think at least 80%. I think cloud is 8%, 10% itself, and commerce is at least a good 70-80%.
As we dive into this,
Right.
in what areas have you seen Alibaba's strengths grow?
I think on that same note, right, I've been looking at a few analyst reports, maybe from like Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan, where they were trying to tease out the different nuances in terms of the commerce market, because many of all these big players like ByteDance, they're not listed. So you don't have a clue what kind of revenue, what kind of cost of goods sold, what's the GMV. So many of these are just extrapolating estimates. So you can see that many of all this, there's a reason why TikTok took the whole world by storm. They need some sort of financial backing, they need some sort of revenue and growth to substantiate those kind of officers and the number of headcount. So I think from that perspective, in terms of the core commerce strength itself, Alibaba has showed that they're able to defend in terms of market share. Albeit still slowly deteriorating, but they're not deteriorating to the extent where it's down like 20% year on year or negative 30% year on year. Unlike many other companies out there during this earnings season are posting this sort of growth. So from that perspective, they're able to fend off competition, and margins are slowly improving. So I think in the last year, it was a heavy reinvestment cycle. So their margins was way below 10%. At least for now in the latest quarter, it's slowly going back up to the double digits again. So from that perspective, you can see that there is some sort of cost discipline, and really the idea of focusing on profitability and not just burning cash for the sake of burning and just pulling out some random growth rates that are not even palatable to many investors.
What I'm hearing is that Alibaba's strengths here are in operational discipline, managing costs, and doing all this while being a public company.
Right.
So it's more transparent.
Right.
And to do this with the quarterly earnings cadence and pressure, it's hard. And again, this is not Alibaba being a Nokia to another company's iPhone. They're actually holding relatively well. In what areas do you see Alibaba's challenges growing?
Right. I think not only looking at the Chinese market, I think cloud adoption is a real problem. For many investors, they have been rather disappointed. I've been having some conversations with the rest of the people in my community as well. When we look back 2019, the cloud growth was like 60%, 50%, and everybody thought, hey, this is the next AWS. We found the treasure. And then when the whole crackdown came in, they started plateauing and even started going down. It took a nosedive. But when I compare it to their competitors, so their second biggest competitor is actually Tencent. So Tencent, if you were to look at their earnings report, they totally removed the cloud segment. So last time, they still provided some sort of guidance saying that, this part of Tencent Cloud is growing by X percentage. Now in this recent report, there was totally no mention of numbers, and at least from the last few reports, many people have made some graphs and it was in the negative territory. So Alibaba being able to still grow at least 3-4%, it's nothing to be happy about or excited about. But considering all things considered, I think it's still relatively fine. But I think a lot of us are all hopeful because the market is forward-looking, right? We want to be excited about something, about some sort of cloud adoption. We know that cloud adoption will be a when thing, not a if thing. But the problem is, how long is this when? Is it going to be the next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years? And if adoption is going to be slow, the appreciation in terms of share price and in terms of how it's going to translate to net income, operating margins, it's not going to come so soon as expected. So I think this is one of the key risks in terms of cloud adoption.
Is there a plan B? If cloud's growth still stays in single digits for the next 1 or 2 years, what's the alternative for Alibaba to grow?
I think now if you were to look at how they've been positioning the business, there's this two shining light somewhere in the ashes where they're looking at their local consumer services and the logistics business. But truth be told, it's not a long-term solution. So those two businesses usually tend to have a much lower margin compared to cloud. So cloud, it's easily 20 to 30% long-term margins. Looking at AWS, I think it's at 26 or 28%. So looking at it, I think in terms of positioning the business to weather this sort of short-term storms, there is still some sort of growth rate that can substantiate the upcoming growth. But I think long term, it's really still that cloud market, and the adoption needs to pick up. So, but here comes the problem. So how long is the timeline? And investors are slightly impatient. They want to know visibility, but it's clearly a question with no proper answer, because there's no one that can tell me that, hey, when is this cloud adoption going to start picking up? 10%, 20%, 30%? We don't know. Truth be told, I think there is also this tail end risk where what if it doesn't come into fruition in the next one or two decades?
And that's top of mind for many people. Yourself, your portfolio is currently 60% Alibaba.
Right.
What's one tip you have for Alibaba investors today?
I wouldn't call it tip, because we can't give financial advice here. But I mean, personally, it's good to keep track of fundamentals and to keep track of how the company has been growing thus far. If you are losing sleep about it, I guess it's good to kind of cut your position if to a level that you're comfortable. I'm not saying that to sell out everything, and many people has been exasperated as well. Like, I've been in this stock for a good 1 or 2 years, and this stock is not moving. It keeps going down, and what am I supposed to do? I think at the end of the day, investing is still a personal game. You need to get over that hurdle yourself. We can't really give you specific advice on what you should or should not do, but from that perspective, I think at least on a long-term horizon, there is still a lot of tailwinds to assist the business in growing to greater heights. But that's it. Whether you are patient enough to wait it out or not. I think that's my perspective thus far. Yeah.
And you're not just waiting for Alibaba, you're open to other opportunities to grow your portfolio as well.
Yeah. I think initially I got the title of being all in Alibaba because there was really a point in time where I think other than Alibaba, I was holding KWEB. So KWEB is a Chinese internet tech ETF as well. So yeah, my exposure was totally in Chinese tech. But then recently, as you get more cash flow in, you start investing or looking into other businesses as well. It's slowly diversifying, but I'm still extremely concentrated in the Chinese tech sector specifically. Yeah.
Recent events have also shaken many of us, yes? Things that were seen as very stable, even like FTX and crypto, where so many investors were in, even Temasek with $200 million. We can't take for granted that no major black swans could happen. Even for me with Tesla, it doesn't mean that just because you see Teslas on the road everywhere, that this company is going to be around forever. Anything can happen to any company. Keng, thank you for sharing your insights on Alibaba.
Right. Thanks for having me on the channel.
Hopefully, we will say open sesame to growth next year. And to all the Alibaba investors, if you found this useful, please subscribe to Keng's channel. You'll find a link in the video description. He talks a lot about Alibaba, but also more than that. And also recently, you've got a podcast.
Right. Shameless plug. I think we can get Daren on one of the episodes in future, but I think it's more of trying to push the boundaries, because we realized that I think the entire podcast scene, or at least in the Singapore scene, the YouTube community is quite small. So we wanted to try to eke out and create a niche on our own, and to really kind of provide that Singaporean perspective. So yeah, I think the podcast is called Backholder Pod. If you guys are interested, feel free to subscribe to that as well. And yeah, remember to smash the like to this video.
Let us know what you think about Alibaba right now. If you found this video useful, please click the like button, hit subscribe to stay updated to more videos on investing.